when you have these numbers, you now can do the calculation or you can have somebody do it for you. But customer acquisition cost, if you're spending money on Facebook ads or, Google ads or something, what's your return? What are you getting back?
Hey, welcome back to the Dave Kittle Show. And only watch this, only continue watching and listening to this if you are a physical therapy practice owner, maybe PT, OT. If you want to make more money, you want to help more patients get results. That's the hook for today. We got Sturdy McKee back on the podcast, longtime friend. I think I've known him for about 10 years and also my business coach, helping me with a ton of things behind the scenes. And we're going to talk about something that is not your fault. You're a therapy practice owner. It's not your fault if you don't know your numbers, if you don't understand the financial components behind your practice and your business. And we got some tips and ideas and strategies today, basically like a free coaching call to help you out. Some free strategies and tips on how to do this. I would suggest if you're listening to iTunes or Spotify to jump over to the YouTube because Sturdy's going to share the screen. Sturdy, what's going on, man?
Hey, Dave. Well, yeah, thanks. Number one, thanks for having me. This is awesome. But I just want to reflect back to you that this was something that came out of a conversation with you. We were talking about some of the numbers and that, I was kind of lamenting that this isn't just PT owners, by the way. This is any business owner. You go out and do it because you're really passionate about the thing you do, even if that's like making beer or making pastries or a coffee shop or whatever. You're passionate about that thing, but then you realize, oh, I need to know how to manage the business. I need to know how to do all this other stuff like the marketing, the management, the finances, on and on. And we don't learn that anywhere. And you were the one that was like, well, yeah, but you got to say it's, what was it? Hormozy says it's not your fault. The fact that you don't know that is not your fault. Right. And I think that's a really, really important point that you brought up, because one of the emotions, as you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, around the numbers, one of the major emotions around the numbers is feeling guilty, right? Like I should know this, but I don't know enough. And I don't want owners to feel guilty. Do something about it, but don't carry that with you because it's, as you put it, it's not your fault. Right? Where do you learn this? You don't get this in school.
It's okay. I think you said of all the owners that you've spoken to over the years and that you've helped or that you've consulted with, that's their first emotion, right? Is that they feel guilty.
Yeah.
And what most of them do, and it's okay if this is you also listening or watching, you put your head in the sand, you know it's something to look at. You don't have someone there. Your accountant's not going to do it. Your bookkeeper's not going to do it with you.
Yes.
So you put your head in the sand and you feel guilty, but you meaning me, I've done it and many others out there, we resort to like, well, I'll look at it later. I'll do it later. I'll get after it later. Right now, I need to focus on my therapist, my patients,
Right.
My practice, all the things that are like happening right now. And I'll get to that later. And sometimes later never comes, but it's not your fault.
Absolutely not. And so there are two big points that you kind of made me think of, alluded to there. Well, I'll just go back. One is Matt Fitzsimmons, my co-author on these books, right? He's in New Zealand. And we were talking about bookkeepers and accountants. And I was trying to explain to him that in the States, and I've talked to about a dozen bookkeepers now, because my original thought was to work with bookkeepers or work with a CPA. And all those conversations were kind of a disaster from my perspective, because what they would say is, I'm trying to get the owners to understand their P&L and their balance sheets. Number one, your balance sheet. When are you actually going to use your balance sheet? If you're going to sell the business or you're doing financing, maybe, but that's why you have the accountant to interpret that for you. You don't need to become a master of the balance sheet. You do need to know some stuff about the P&L, but where I got super frustrated and where the conversation with Matt was very enlightening was I couldn't get a bookkeeper here in the US to connect the dots between the operational metrics and the finances. Right? They didn't seem to understand the visit number turned into the revenue, right? Or like, again, if you're running a cafe, the number of tickets and what the price per ticket is, like, are you selling a pastry and a coffee and, whatever else, like that plus the churn turns into your revenue. Nobody was connecting the dots. And Matt was just flabbergasted. He's like, well, that's what they do here. right? And we kind of call that managerial accounting. But the thing is, here in the States, particularly, I think North America in general, but in the States particularly, you don't get that managerial accounting until you're at like a corporate level and you hire somebody to do it, and a CFO type person or something like that to then try to connect the dots. And even in that case, they don't necessarily do it that well. They're experts at the finance side, but not necessarily the management or the operations side. And that was the thing that I kind of realized it's missing. It's completely missing. And, I have clients that I've taught, they've graduated. We still meet once a month and go through the numbers and what to do next, because they're good, but they want that second set of eyes. They want guidance. They want to make sure they're focused on the right thing. So the second thing, though, Dave, that you made me think of, which I think is so important from a PT perspective, or OTs, anybody in the medical field, is we tend to manage our business off of the subjective information, right? Our employees tell us this, it feels like this, the numbers are the objective. Right. So how do you create an assessment like the SOAP note, right? Subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. How do you create an assessment based solely off the subjective? There's a risk of being wrong. There's a risk of missing something. And that also brings up a point. The numbers don't necessarily tell you what's wrong, but they tell you where to look. And they are a validation. They're a corroboration of what you're hearing on the subjective side. So just like your clinical exam, I have shoulder pain, I can't raise it. Well, you're going to measure that. You're going to look, you're going to do something to see if you can change it. You're going to measure it again. It's the same thing with your business, right? It's just that the cycle is a little bit longer. You're not going to get an immediate change on your units per visit, right? You're going to compare that month to month or something. But yeah, it's the objective data that's going to help paint the full picture. It doesn't answer it by itself. And there's just a lack of anybody out there connecting the dots between your operations and what your P&L actually looks like.
Awesome. Yeah. Can we review the story where you had the two talkative physical therapists to outline, or is it too early?
Yeah.
Because that paints a picture of like, here's a challenge that's going on. The numbers give you a signal, like a smoke signal. They give you some idea that there's something off, but they don't tell you what's going on. Then you guys had to dive into what was going on.
Let's go big picture real quick first. So you're going to collect like 7 numbers, okay? And then we're going to look at those. Those 7 numbers can be done, or not, maybe not all 7, but parts of them can be done at the therapist level, at the front desk level, at the clinic level, at the company level. Okay. And that's where things get a little bit more complicated. That's where it helps to have somebody, doing some of this for you, because you can be sitting there entering all the data if you want to, but once again, that's kind of like $10, $20, $25 an hour work when you could be focusing on $1,000 an hour work and stuff. And we can talk about that more later too, but is that the best use of your time, the data entry piece? Like what you need to be doing as the owner is interpreting that data. So what you're alluding to, we were looking at numbers, and I'm going to share kind of a similar type thing. So as we look at the numbers, okay, a couple of the numbers are visits, and here, I'll show you real quick. So I wrote down a couple of them, right? So we're going to look at your revenue, we're going to look at expense, we're going to look at visits, we're going to look at new patients, okay? Your visits and new patients you can then do calculations. So we can look at visits per new patient, right? Or visits per case. When we look at visits per case number, you're going to have a target for your practice. And this is also where I kind of hate benchmarking, because your context is different. Okay. So we can look at industry standards, industry averages, but your context, your patient population, the types of diagnoses, the demographics, on and on, are all different from your other friends or people or coworkers or colleagues or whatever, right? So you're going to want to set those targets for yourself. So, I see generally in an outpatient ortho practice, like we're going to do generic, anywhere from 11 to like 23 visits per case. That's 23 might seem really high for some people, based on the patient population and the situations and the rest of it. I had a client who was there and that's what they were doing. And they weren't over treating. They weren't, milking people. That was who they were seeing. So the 11's kind of on the low end. So, sometimes it's around 13, 15, something, but it really depends. You set those targets for your practice based on your patients and your plans of care and your therapists, right? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because that number on average for the company might not look too bad, but this is where we want to drill down. I'm going to show you this. So this is, you asked me earlier if this is real. It's slightly fictionalized. It's based on a true story, right? So it's a little bit different, but I don't want to scare anybody off with the spreadsheet. That's, by the way, if you want to scare your staff off, open a spreadsheet or start talking about sales, right? So either one of those will end the conversation real fast. But what we're looking at here is if we have PTs 1 through 7, we have visits per case here, the average over 6 months of 13.2, 13.1, and then here 10.6. So the clinic is at 12.2, or the company is at 12.2, but we have a discrepancy of like 30% here, right? 25, 30%. That's interesting. So then we can delve in and dive in and figure out what else is going on. This is where you have to go back to the subjective. This is where you have to go back and find out. Again, it tells us where to look. We want to look at that PT number 7 and figure out why they're below everybody else, but we don't have the answer as to why. It could be the patients they're getting and they're writing plans of care for fewer visits because for whatever reason, they're getting a patient population that doesn't need as many visits. Okay, that's fine. That's an answer. It could be that patients are dropping out. Could be any number of things, right? But that's where we get into the diagnostics, kind of a differential diagnosis, if you will. So, you have a patient come in again with shoulder pain. They present a certain way. You pretty much know what's going on, but you still verify it and validate it. And there are probably 3 things that are going to be the answer 80 to 90% of the time, right? But you're going to rule out 1, 2, or 3. And if you roll it all 3, now it's something more interesting. It's something rare, whatever. But we still go through that process. And I don't see people do that enough with their business, right? They jump ahead, they guess. And you wouldn't accept that if you were going to a therapist or to your doctor, right? And if they do that, you get upset about it. But we do that with our businesses all the time, right? So the story you're asking about, this was interesting to me. And I think to you, obviously, but we had a situation like that, right? We had, in one of the clinics, a big open space. We had 2 therapists, both of whom seemed like they were doing similar things, right? They talked incessantly, both of these 2 therapists. However, their numbers were 30, 40% apart. Okay. So one of them was seeing like 12, 13 visits a case. The other one was seeing like 8 or something. So we're trying to figure out, well, why is that? And when we looked at the plans of care, just to say it wasn't a clinical thing, because when we looked at the plans of care, her plans of care were written for around 12 or 13 on average, but her patients were only coming in less than 9 times, right? So now we've got a gap between clinical decision-making and actual visits. So that was concerning. So I'm trying to figure out why. We're asking her, we're going through our process, the new patient evaluation process. We make sure that we get buy into the plan of care. We're filling out an agreed upon plan. All that. She was doing all that, right? So that's the number one thing that usually happens. We ruled that out. So then we're like, okay, what else is it? And I went into the clinic and just kind of eavesdropped, right? And again, back to these 2 therapists, both talked the entire time. Like they were talking the whole time they were with patients. And we're talking 45-minute visits, the whole time. Not my MO with patients. I talk and I stop and I listen and I talk, and I listen and they were just constant. But one was really, her patients were going through the full plan, hitting their goals, happy. The other one, people were dropping out. We're like, well, what's going on? As we eavesdropped and kind of listened in on it, the one therapist with the higher visit number talked incessantly, but it was all about the patients. It was all about what you did and how you felt and tying it back to the goals. And it was connecting the dots for them all the way along and celebrating their wins. Like, well, last week you were only doing this and now you're doing this. And look at everything was about them. And it was just really hyping them up, right? The other therapist, she was talking about herself. what she did this past week and the wedding she went to in Napa, the dinner she had, the thing she was going to, the Warriors game she was going to go to on the weekend and stuff. And, from a patient perspective, I don't care. Right. I mean, that maybe it's nice to know you have a life and you're doing something, but we want to get it back to me because I'm the one here. I'm paying the money. It's about my problem, not you. And she didn't get that. So we had to really kind of stop and say, don't change your style. You're allowed to chat and talk and do all that, whatever works for you. But can you make it about them? Can you ask a couple more questions? Can you celebrate their wins? Can you stop talking about yourself and what you did? And that was a very interesting kind of conversation, but it wasn't what we expected to quote unquote be wrong. Right. But when we went and looked at it and drilled down, that's what we found. And that kind of brings up the point of you can see the numbers, but they don't give you a diagnosis. They simply tell you where to look.
Right. I love that story. And I'm glad that we highlighted it here because you guys had you had the difference in the numbers, the two different numbers. You knew the two different therapists and you already knew
same clinic.
Same office, right?
Yeah.
Same office. They both would get, typically the same number of evaluations. However, the therapist who talked about themselves a lot started to have more openings in their schedule because they didn't have the existing patients book out the full plan of care.
Right.
So now also you're getting the therapist that is kind of like a leaky bucket compared to the therapist who is completing the plans of care with the existing patients. The therapist who is talking about themselves a lot and me, this is what I did. And this is I'm cool. And I'm traveling here and I went to this restaurant and this and that, talking about themselves. Now they have more openings in their schedule. So now with your practice, and that you've sold it, but when you had your practice,
right,
the new evaluations are going to that therapist who is already subpar in completing the plans of care, getting the patients to their goals, completing, getting them the outcome that they want.
Totally.
So you get the new patients in, towards the quote unquote, I just made this up on the fly, the leaky bucket type therapist who completing the plans of care. And that therapist is already talking about themselves, and they're going to continue to do that unless you guys intervened and addressed it. And I love the fact that the numbers gave you the signal. You guys were like, you and your leadership team were like, why don't we go and poke around, hang around the office and just listen. We're going to just listen to how these therapists are evaluating and treating. And then that was how you found the difference. You found the difference of what they were actually saying because you and your leadership team were actually dropping by, not getting in the way, but you were listening to exactly what they were saying to your patients. You guys are self-pay or out of network at the time. So all your patients are paying out of pocket. And then boom, you found the reason.
One of the important things there is to know that we had already ruled out 2 or 3 other probable causes. Right. So the most likely is they're not following the new patient evaluation process and actually having a conversation around the plan of care and getting buy-in, explaining it and all that stuff. That was something we discovered and we saw and I see now today. And if you've got 7 therapists, like what you just showed, the ones with the highest, and I see this consistently, the ones with the highest visits per case are generally the most experienced. Okay. So meaning that it's not that they don't know what to do and they're less efficient. People are actually showing up, right? Because they believe in, and that person is connecting the dots for the patient and that person's getting results and that patient's showing up because they're getting results. What I see consistently is the therapists with the least experience are the ones with the fewest visits per case. And when we're not ever trying to get people to see more visits per case for the sake of seeing them or to, make more money or whatever, we don't want that. We want you seeing them according to your best clinical decision making. So we're trying to close the gap. But what I don't see when people aren't doing the numbers this way, they're not looking at the plans of care and then comparing that to their actuals and their results. So again, the most common situation was that the therapist isn't having that conversation. Once again, that's not their fault. We don't get taught that in PT school, right? We've talked about this when we do the eval in PT school. right? And the clinical instructor's there and another student's the patient. The way it happened with us was we'd go through the eval, we'd do the thing, the other student would play patient. We would start to write down our assessment and plan. The other student, the patient, would get up and leave, and then we would turn and give the answer, our assessment and our plan to the CI to be told that we were right or wrong. And that was it. Right. And then, I mean, you see this every day. In real life, we have another person we need to negotiate with. Right. I don't mean negotiate, convince them. I just mean talk to them about, okay, it's going to take, 6 weeks and 14 visits and whatever to get you where you want to go. This is where you want to go. These are your goals. This is where you are today. To get from here to there, you need to do this, right? X, Y, Z. And we have that conversation and then say, what's the magic question, Dave? How's that sound to you? Right? Because in school, we're not taught that. That's the end of the conversation. You need to do this. And the patient in their head's going, nuh-uh, or wait, I'm going to be gone, or I've got 3 kids and 2 jobs and whatever it is. But if you don't ask, how does that work for you? How does that sound to you? Is that good? Is that going to be okay? You don't have that conversation. So that's the most likely, most frequent thing I see around, the visits per case thing. So that accounts, again, back, 70, 80% of the time, that's the issue. When that's being done, like we said with this one, she was doing that, but then people were still dropping off. And you're like, so what else? So that's where we keep going, because as you said, the leaky bucket, the least efficient person, the person giving the worst customer service, the worst patient experience, is seeing more of our patients, more of our new customers. That bothered me, as a therapist, because we can talk about making more money, increasing the value of your practice, all that stuff. But ultimately, one of the things I love about this whole profession, this industry, is if you do better, if you do right by more people, you will make more money. Right. So if we actually get people to show up for their plans of care as they need and get them across the finish line to their goals, not only are they happier, but our staff's also happier because they're succeeding with their patients. Those patients then go tell other people. We bring more people in. They tell their doctors. Doctors refer more people. Their coworkers come in. Their families come in. Our practice grows, and we do better financially because we're doing good. And that, I love that. We're not trying to sell somebody something they don't need. We're not trying to inflate the numbers in any way. We just, we're trying to get people to do what is in their own best interest. And when we do that, we do better too. So
I love how you,
in my mind, there's no conflict, right?
I love how you double down on the reminder that a senior therapist is not always going to have the shortest plans of care. Yes, their clinical skills will get better. Yes, they might actually clear someone's back pain in, 7 visits, but then over time, a lot more of the patients that, even if they're self-pay or out of pocket, they might be like 100% better in 7 visits of their low back pain. But then they might say, you know what, I have a trip coming up. I have a cruise coming up. Like, why don't I schedule one more visit a week for the next 3 or 4 weeks until I have my trip? And then now that plan of care on their own volition of the patient maybe goes to 10 visits or 11 visits as opposed to shorter. And more of the patients and clients, like you said, are going to be raving fans. They're going to be willing to pay out of pocket. They're going to say, oh, well, my back is better in 5 or 10 visits, but I have this other issue. Why don't I do this issue? Why don't I work on this thing?
Or I just don't want this to happen again. Right. So maybe it's even the same thing, but I'm like, okay, so yeah, I feel better. And now that you have the rapport and the trust with the therapist who might be saying, I'm glad you feel better. That's awesome. That's step number 1, but you're still not strong enough, flexible enough, whatever, to make sure this doesn't recur. Right. And especially like back pain, I was thinking ankle sprains and stuff too. Like there are all these kinds of issues that are recurrent if we don't really finish the job. Right. So yeah, that younger therapist could have been getting them kind of out of pain, but not fully to their goals, not fully better. And then the patient doesn't really see the point and isn't going to come in. So those are all considerations, but this is where, again, back to it's not your fault. Where do we learn how to manage other people? Right. And you and I we talked about this. I was, talking with somebody else who will not be named, but they're literally majoring in management in business school at a major university. And I just asked them, I'm like, oh, so, what are you doing? Or like, tell me about your curriculum. Tell me about your management courses. Like, went through the management courses. There was one leadership and ethics course, right? And I was like, okay, so is there anything other than that leadership and ethics course that focuses on people? And he was like, he went through and kind of back through the courses and stuff. He was like, no. Like, so then this is somebody who, as soon as they graduate from college with a management degree, is going to go out and run a team of, 4, 5, 8 people or something, right? With no training. This is a management major with no training on how to have a meeting, right? A one-on-one meeting with their direct reports, or how to set clear accountabilities for their direct reports, or and I'm just sitting there going, if that's the case, then, I mean, all these practice owners are going out there and we're supposed to just figure it out. And, it goes back to my story, which I think probably resonates with a lot of people. I had, when I opened a practice, I had done every job in the business aside from ownership and assistant. So I had been an aide, I had done billing, I had worked the front desk, I'd been a PT, I'd done all the roles in the company. I thought that would give me a leg up. And it did ultimately in some ways, but I learned in the first several weeks, as soon as we were hiring people, that I had no idea how to interview and hire. I had no idea how to manage people. I had no idea how to set up expectations. I'm sitting there trying to figure it all out on my own. And that's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. There are way more resources today than there were when I was doing this, but it's still kind of crazy that we don't have any of that. And even when it's offered, like in PT school and stuff, a lot of people check out and aren't interested because it's too far down the road, right? It's not relevant right now.
And any owners watching or listening, like they don't have to necessarily be like an extrovert to learn this, to learn about the people stuff.
God, no.
I think even you, would you say that you're introverted in general? Like you're a little
totally. Yeah. And the research shows that introverts are actually better managers. Okay. And I think that we put too much stock in personality styles and stuff. I think one of the things that we sign up for when we become an owner is being able to interact with and translate and speak the languages of all the different people in our organization, right? So we have to learn how to interact with the people who are different from us as well as the people who are similar to us. And by the way, that diversity of ideas, of opinions, of background, of perspective and all is a huge strength. But what ends up happening if you don't know how to recruit and hire and pick people based on similar values and purpose and then maybe skill set, but you can teach skills, right? But if you're not selecting that way, what you end up with are a lot of people that are like you. Because we kind of have an affinity for people who are more similar to us, whether they look like us or whether they act like us or whatever. And we get a team that is a little bit more monolithic rather than heterogeneous, a little bit more diversified. And that diversity actually is a huge, huge strength. So again, it's not your fault, right? Where do we learn any of this stuff? We try to lay some of this stuff out in the books. That's great. But having someone who can help you acquire those skills that's necessary, that's important. Fast track it basically. Because, a lot of these folks, they do learn it on their own. The real issue is what's the timeline to do that? Right? You're smart. You could figure it out. Have you gone faster because you've had somebody helping you to problem solve and share experiences and, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's just too many things with, business and our practice. Like same thing with the hiring, the recruiting, hiring, onboarding process that you helped me with. That has, yes, I had to pay for coaching, but that has accelerated my ability to identify talent, have a formal process in place that filters out the wrong fits, that filters in the correct fits. And that's just one example. And then the other example is this with numbers and understanding, a lot more of the dynamics around the practice. And yeah, we didn't learn it. I had one, I graduated in 2011. So 14 years ago, not that long ago from a DPT program. And we had one kind of like forget the name. It might have been PT management or something. It was like a
Yeah.
semi part of the class talked about private practice, but it was taught by a private practice owner that was also faculty.
Right.
But the whole class was not about entrepreneurship or finances or private practice or business or anything. So it was like part of a semester on what we're talking about, the thing that actually can help your practice thrive. We only had a part of a semester on.
Right.
So, and that's why it's not your fault. That's why it's not the owner's fault.
No. And then we go out, and this is, and once again, this is not exclusive to PTs by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the E-Myth by Michael Gerber way back, basically laid out why, but there are three types of work, and technical, tactical, which is like the treating the patients, the doing of the things; managerial, which is, managing, making sure things happen, the right things happen; and then entrepreneurial, strategic, deciding what happens. And what Gerber said is that, more than 50% of businesses fail in the first few years. And then it's like by 10 years, it's like 80 or 90%. But the reason is that almost everybody who goes out and starts a business is really good at that technical, tactical piece, but they don't even necessarily know that the management work exists or that the strategic work exists. So how do they put a different hat on and do that work if they don't even know it exists? And then when they start finding out it exists, they don't know what to do. Like, it's a totally different skill set. And that's another thing, I think, the mindset piece that owners struggle with a lot is they're experts. They're really, really good at the thing that they do. So to then say, oh, I'm a beginner, or I don't know enough about this over here, it's embarrassing. It's humiliating. You don't feel good about that. But once again, like you started with this. It's not your fault. How do you know what you don't know? Right? There are ways to do it. There are things that you can start to do. But like what I ask my clients to do. So this is a challenge for anybody who's still listening to this, right? Spend 2 hours a week, an hour to 2 hours a week, working on your business, thinking about your business, deciding what needs to get done next, deciding what's going to happen over the next 3 months, setting goals, working on those goals. All I'm asking them to do is spend as much time on their business as they would with a patient, right? 1 to 2 hours a week, focusing in on the business like it was a patient. Go through the subjective, go through the objective, decide where you are today, what's going on, and create a plan to get to your goals. And, do that consistently. Consistency, just like in patient care and treatment, is way more important than intensity. Consistency of effort over time will get you a lot farther.
Absolutely. I believe in that.
Yeah. Well, we see it. We have the evidence. We see it all the time, right?
So what else can we screen share to help the folks out there with this? If there's any other like stories or examples?
Oh, there's a ton of them. I mean, the risk is just going too long, but I'll show you like a KPI dashboard in a second. But for anybody out there, you can go to 6hourceo.com, go here, click on get the critical 7. This will open up. You just enter your info and we'll send you a PDF that has the critical 7 metrics listed. Now, I'm going to give you a preview of what we do with those though, because for clients, what they get is this. Here's the instructions. You can pause that and look. Here's the definitions of the different things. A big part of what I'm trying to do, you alluded to this before, Dave. You learn these things, you get an induction process in place, you learn how to manage. It's just like PT. Those are things that you can use from here on out, right? We're not trying to make you dependent like so many people, so many other service providers. We're not selling advertising that you have to keep paying for, right? This isn't medication, this is PT. So then they have numbers that they enter, and I've got some mock-up numbers here for, again, names have been changed to protect the innocent, but we've got these numbers that they enter and put in. And by the way, we figure these out together. And then these are where the numbers come from. So grab this one from the billing information, this one from the bank, this one from the EMR, and you plug them in. This is something we do for you as well, but you plug those in, and then what you get is a dashboard, which it starts to look a little bit more intimidating, which is also part of why we want somebody to walk you through it. And again, I'm doing this with people who have already graduated, know all the stuff. They still meeting once a month, going over the numbers to make sense and interpret it. But then we set targets. So here's an example down here. We set targets like productivity 100%. And there will be people who set it at 90, whatever. That's fine. We'll figure that out, whatever it is for you. In this instance, we're saying 217 visits a month, 11 visits a day is actually what we expect. So if you set your standard at 12 and then create 95% or whatever, that works. But anyway, we mark these numbers, red, yellow, or green based on whether we've exceeded or are close or are missing the target. So we lay the targets out over here and we go through it. And when something's red, we're looking at that as, is that an aberration? Is February a short month? We didn't collect as much. So our cost per visit looked higher. Was it kind of artificial? Is it temporary, or is it a problem? And that's where the interpretation and stuff comes in. And, so we walk through it all, not trying to make it more complicated, but to do the calculations like, here we have, sorry, I'm jumping around, but like the visits per case number here, we look at that and that's constant because these are kind of fictionalized numbers, but that'll bump up and down depending upon the visits and the new patients and all that stuff. So anyway, that's kind of where what we're looking at and where we go into. And, you can have, again, people can have, they can create their own, you can screenshot and try to do it yourself. You can get help from somebody, but what I would really, really, really recommend is that you find someone who can help you connect the dots between the operational metrics and the financials. Because when they come at it just from the financial standpoint, there are too many missing pieces. And we then want to take those numbers though and make sure what we're doing aligns with our values, with the purpose, with what we're trying to get done. Again, not just trying to see more visits, but are we seeing the right number of visits? Right? Are people actually getting their patients across the finish line? Are they billing appropriately? Right? And here's another, just a quick aside. I've never caught a staff therapist overbilling. Okay. Even when I was behind the curtain with 900 PT practices and an EMR and looking at the revenue cycle and the EMR stuff and the billing, saw owners who were overbilling, but never ever saw a staff therapist who was overbilling. Right. So often there's a little gap there, even if it's 3% or 5%, to increase your revenue and, be more aligned with what you're actually doing, do a little bit better. If let's use this example, if there's a 5% opportunity on the units per visit and you're at a 10% profit margin and you add 5% more revenue to your top line, that's 50% more profit. Does that make sense? Let's go from 10 to 15% just by focusing in and getting your operations dialed in there. And it's again all about operations. Like how do I translate that into my therapist's activities and what they're actually doing on my billing department or whomever is responsible for that? But how do we get that result? How do we affect that result?
Mm-hmm. One thing I said to you maybe a couple of months ago, because it was becoming more and more popular, maybe the way I'm being targeted on Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever, but
yeah,
the whole fractional CFO thing. And I said to you on one of our coaching calls, I said, hey, what about a fractional CFO? You remember what you said?
You'll have to remind me, Dave.
I think you replied, why would you need that? And I think you might have said either you or a colleague didn't do a fractional CFO until they were like 3 million or more in revenue or something.
Right.
Maybe just give the audience, because I think it's becoming a little more popular. So a fractional, like a part-time chief financial officer for any business, right, service-based business, PT practice out there. You can't, you don't, if you're doing 500K or a million or, whatever, 1.2 million in revenue, you're not going to have a full-time financial officer as part of your staff. So the fractional CFO thing is becoming a little more popular with different folks. So why would that not be a great idea for a practice that's like 500K in revenue to 2 million in revenue?
So this whole concept, it's been around for a while, but I think in the healthcare world, we're just kind of getting used to it. But you can hire somebody basically part-time as a CM, like a chief marketing officer, a chief operations officer, a chief financial officer, all that. When you have a multi-billion dollar business, you have enough work for a full-time CFO, right? We hired a fractional CFO like 2 days a month when we were at $4 million because there was enough work. And really a big part of what I did, and that was still probably too early, by the way, but what I did was I hired him to go through it with me and teach me. And he was great. He was wonderful, right? But even he, after about 6 months or maybe 9 months or a year, he was like, you know what to do. You don't need me. He was going to go spend that day a week or that 2 days a month with a tech company who could pay him more, by the way, but who also was growing and needed his input way more than we did. Once we kind of knew what to do, it was gonna not set it and forget it, but I liked doing that stuff, right? And that's another piece. Like one of the things you will tend to want to outsource are the things that drag you down, the things that you don't want to spend your time doing. So, but yeah, it's like if you're at $1 million and you got, 4 therapists roughly, plus or minus and all, you don't need a fractional CFO. You might, so this is where I'm kind of coming in. Connect the dots, but do that. We'll collect the data for you. We'll put it together and then we'll meet for an hour and give you what to do. Now, if that turns into like the induction process or some other project, we can do that too. But that's above and beyond. But I mean, why would you hire somebody a day a week for $1 million business when, just cost by itself, right? What's a real CFO get paid, right? 200, 250,000, 500,000. What are you going to pay 20% of $250,000, 50,000 a year for somebody to work in your business 1 day a week to give you what kind of result? What's the ROI on that? And that's why I'm saying like, even at $4 million, it didn't make sense to hire that person on a permanent type basis, right? It made sense to hire them to teach me and learn, which was great. But, and again, I could take that knowledge and continue to use it. But, I know that I would tell practices that are like at 10 million, 20 million and stuff that, yeah, that might make sense. Or even a fractional COO, because some of them have like operations officers, but to come up with what you're doing, again, that strategic work, like deciding what needs to get done, isn't really a full-time job. Then you're paying that C-level person to do director level work or whatever. And I think they're more efficient. They're better uses of your money and your time. But I think we get scared, right? We get scared that we don't know it, so we need somebody else to do it, and they don't teach us. They make it more complicated, so we're now dependent upon them. And I'm not a fan. I think there are more efficient ways to get it done, and that's why we're trying to do this at a much lower cost than the numbers. It ain't $50,000 a year.
Yeah. So in that example, you were saying maybe 50,000 a year for a fractional CFO. They're coming into your business 1 day a week. So 52 weeks a year, maybe 48 weeks. You're basically paying them $1,000 a day.
Yeah. Like, are you getting this, by the way, is exactly why the numbers matter, because what's the ROI on that? Right. If I can look at that and say, am I okay? I'm paying $1,000, but if I'm getting $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 back, that's totally worth it, right? But if I'm not getting that back, this goes back to there are no expenses in business. There are only investments. So if you're spending money in your business, it should be getting you some kind of return. Right. Now, the other side of that coin, I see people, I was just talking with a client, not about any services I offer, but analyzing another service, and you're going to get 10x back. You're going to spend $100 a month on per PT for the service, and you'll easily get your 100 back. You'll probably get 1,000. And they're offering a trial for 2 months so you can see. I'm like, and then they still hesitate. Like, why? I mean, if you could take that money and put it anywhere and get 10 times back, why would you not spend that money? Right? It just doesn't. And you have a guarantee. You have an opt-out. Test it. See. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. right? But your gamble is really small compared to your potential payoff. Those are the things that we want to do. Like that's the strategic work, right? By the way, deciding, oh, this thing could help our efficiencies. This thing could help us, get more people in. This could help us make more money. This could help us help more people. But then really doing a critical analysis of that as well. Like here's another example, Dave, customer acquisition cost, right? When you have these numbers, you now can do the calculation or you can have somebody do it for you. But customer acquisition cost, if you're spending money on Facebook ads or, Google ads or something, what's your return? What are you getting back? How many new patients are you getting from that? What's your cost per new patient for that channel? And I'll give you another story. This was a potential client at the time who did sign on after this, right? But for whatever reason, I looked at their P&L ahead of them coming on. There was a $1.4 million business, less than $2 million anyway, spending $76,000 a year on advertising. Okay. And I'm like, why are you spending that much? And like, oh, well, it gets us these new patients. And I'm like, okay, how many new patients? Now, to their credit, they were tracking the numbers. They had the number of leads through that channel and they had the number of new patients. That $76,000, they went back and looked and they had 97 new patients over the course of the year from that channel. When you divide 76,000 by 97, you get about I remember it was $787 was the customer acquisition cost. Right? So like for me, for a coaching client, if I spend $1,000 to get a client, that will pay off over the course of the first year, right? No problem. That's not a bad investment doing what I do. For a PT practice, who in their instance was making around $150, $200 profit per case, they were spending almost $800 to get that client that then gave them a $200 profit. So they were literally seeing 3 more people through their other channels in order just to pay the advertising to get that client. Right? And it was like, and again, until they had the numbers and knew what to look at, they were like, well, no, it's working for us. Like, okay, how much is it costing? They went and did the numbers and were like, oh my God, no, this is not okay. Right? So, but once again, if you don't know, you don't know. So getting somebody on your side who can do that in a customized way. So I've also heard some of these others about like our way or the highway. Everybody needs to do this. If that fits for you, that's wonderful. But if it doesn't, then get somebody who can help you actually do what you need. Right? It's like what you do for your patients. You don't give everybody the same thing because they come in with shoulder pain. Right? What's the actual problem? What are their goals? Where are they trying to get to? Their treatment plan is going to be customized.
Right. Well, we covered a lot in a short period of time, and I also threw the fractional CFO thing at you, which we didn't even plan for. What's a good recap or wrap up for practice owners out there? Again, we didn't learn this in DPT school. We were basically taught on how to kind of be a staff physical therapist at a corporate, a hospital, a private practice, but to do the evaluation and treatment. That's what we went to school for. Right. And so if you don't know all this stuff, I didn't know it either. Sturdy's still helping me, and it's not your fault if you don't know it. It is, I don't know. I want to say it is your fault if you continue to put your head in the sand and don't address it. Right?
Right.
Is that too direct?
Once again, the way I put it is you signed up for this when you started your business, whether you knew that or not, right? You signed up to learn marketing, to learn management, to learn a little bit about the numbers. You can get assistance with a lot of the stuff because you don't have to be an expert at any of these things, right? Like you're an expert in treating patients, but you do have to be good enough. And one of the areas where you need to be really good in order to continue to grow and scale is that working with your staff and managing people, which again, we use the coaching model. We use, like literally coaching, not life coaching or whatever, but like how you coach a team is how you coach your your people. You hold them accountable, but you help them, you believe in them, you support them, right? We're not just playing traffic cop, but all these things kind of come together, and there is the opportunity. And if you fast track your learning process and get some guidance and some clarity around where you should be focusing your effort, you alluded to this earlier. There's so many things coming at you all the time. There's only so much that you can do at any given time. So what we want to do is figure out what's going to get you the biggest payoff, time, energy, and money for the effort put in. Again, time, energy, and money, right? Like, what are the biggest opportunities? What's the lowest hanging fruit? And prioritize those things and start to knock them out one at a time, put the building blocks in place. And again, you get to use this stuff forevermore, right? It's not, if you're doing it the right way, you're making these decisions once. I still love that. That's one of the Vern Harnish things in scaling up. You make the decision once, you put the process in place, and it's going to take you at least to the next level and possibly beyond that. But you might have to revamp your processes every so often. But we've been through like those growth phases and stuff too. But yeah, having an expert on your side, having just simply another set of eyes. Okay, let's say you don't want the expert, but we'll get another practice owner and you guys talk about it, or the peer-to-peer group, right? But actually share your numbers, because nobody wants to, right? It's kind of like, weight loss or something. Nobody wants to weigh in front of everybody else. But when you do, there's a built-in accountability and a built-in motivation, and you're more likely to have success. So it can be very uncomfortable, but if you embrace that discomfort and you start doing it, you can make real progress. And, once again, to your point, it's not your fault. Everybody is talking about how successful they are and all the good stuff. Nobody talks about all the bad stuff and the anxieties and the rest of it. And we're all kind of hiding that. I can tell you that everybody has problems and challenges. Every single business owner I work with, no matter how long or how good they are, there's a new problem. That is the nature of business. There's something gone wrong this week. And when you embrace the discomfort and you start to talk about it, and you figure out ways forward with that and don't just kind of keep trying to do everything yourself, it becomes so much easier.
Right on. Absolutely. Check out 6hourceo.com. Check out sturdycoaching.com. Also, connect with Sturdy on LinkedIn. You type up and you share a bunch of different blogs and insights. And a lot of times they're like 1 or 2 or 3 minute reads, really, really quick, concise, thoughts. You've been in the trenches for years. You had a 6 clinic location, practice. You sold it during the crazy uncertainty of COVID. And now you're coaching physical therapy practice owners like me. I get the chance to have a Zoom call like this with you 3 times a month or something like that. So not that I'm pitching or presenting, selling your coaching, because I don't get anything from it. But I invited you on here. It's always great to catch up on the podcast, on the Dave Kittle Show. Any other place for folks to reach out to you? I mean, I know you can find your phone number or email. You can reach out to you anywhere else on the internet.
Yeah, the website or LinkedIn are both great. The 6hourceo.com is great. But yeah, you can, I'm not hard to find. I mean, Sturdy McKee, right? Google, just don't go to page 10 or whatever on the search, right?
Awesome, Sturdy. Well, thank you for your time.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Dave. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE at CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.